do you have any questions after the lunch from this morning's presentation and case study before I dive more in detail? Okay. So this segment of the conference, I'm going to dive a bit more into detail without getting too much technical as to how did we create those case studies. Basically, what's the secret sauce to achieve those results that I presented this morning? What exactly is the benefit? And exactly how do you improve audit team performance having the server-based, data center-based type of solution that IDEA server is and that Monitor is. So this is usually a presentation that we try to make as interactive as possible with a smaller group. So feel free to interrupt at any time, but I'm going to try to go through it, again, without being too much technical. I have an IT background, and I love technology. I tend to get carried away in, geek talk. So if you find it's too technical, don't hesitate to scream too technical. So the objective here is to identify what makes people successful when they adopt server-based audit analytics. And this is really what I'm going to try to give you and share a few takeaways as to how did we achieve the success stories. And more importantly, one key component of making you empowered and capable of delivering results is actually to collaborate first with IT. I've heard a great story about people, and just before talking about IT, in God we trust, but we prefer data is exactly the problem with IT. So the data acquisition, as I mentioned earlier, is critical. The hardware and the platform available and the integration of the system is even more. And it's only by strategically involving IT in sharing your pain and explaining them exactly what your mission is that you rally them to your cause and allow you to do the job quickly. IT is not someone that's going to do the work for you, but IT is a gatekeeper in your goal. Is really the key for your success. Without IT sponsorships, without IT buying, even if they're not the decision maker, they will make your life much more difficult. So if we look today, a typical day in audit, we've polled a few of our users, and everyone comes from more or less the same steps. And I think you can relate to this. The first thing you do in the day with IDEA is you import data from some source. You prepare the data in IDEA, clean up, organizing it. You analyze the data sets, create some reports, send emails, share, discuss, do some meetings. This is basically what is a day in the life of IDEA. And in terms of proportion, there's a huge proportion spent on doing data acquisition. So if you think about this, and you put that in the context of a team or several individuals working together, what might happen is the following scenario. Consider auditor A, let's call it Deepji, that spends a lot of time requesting data sets from IT. And there's a delay of 3 days between the systems and the data is given. When he sends the email to IT, say, I urgently need that data request, that data file, it takes 3 days for him to have him. This is a very optimistic scenario. In average, I don't know how it is for you, but when we talk to auditors, it's between 2 to 3 weeks to get the data back sometimes. In the worst case, we've seen something that took 2.5 years in the government. So when you think about this, how are you supposed to do an audit cycle within a year if you get 2.5 years to get the data sets? The best case scenario, it was direct access, obviously. But in this scenario, let's say 3 days. It's a fair estimate nowadays. And the data set that he receives are IT formatted, which means there's headers that don't speak accounting terms. You don't know where the debit and credit is. And you need to spend sometimes spending time cleaning up the data set. At the same time, a senior auditor, B, another auditor, ask for similar data sets. But the data acquired by IT was 5 days after. And he also needs to spend time cleaning the data set. So what you have in this scenario is two people working in silo, spending hours duplicating effort. And this is the scenario I highlighted before. And you see here that discrepancy, that little difference of 2 days between the moment the first data set was punctured and the second one creates a real problem in the process of the data acquisition and data analysis. It's very simple. If you're garbage into the process, you'll get garbage out. So the more the data sets increase, the more auditors you have, the more complexity of analytics you'll apply, the growing challenges you'll have in such environment. You'll have longer analysis time. You'll have to rebaseline if there's discrepancy at the end between two auditors. A larger variety of data means an increasing audit complexity. How do you reconcile different data sources? A changing record set, when you have audit data that is especially transactional data, if you look at e-commerce platforms and the speed at which they process orders, audit data can become a moving target. And the more data you have, the more problems you might have. So when you have such environment, you have quite a few risks without a team approach to it, without a collaborative approach centralized. The data acquisition is cumbersome. Every time you do data imports, you have to redo the import. And if you might have people duplicating the effort, you might have to spend time discovering where to get the data. There's a risk of inaccurate data sources. And this creates just a complexity that is just not acceptable nowadays anymore. In the state the systems are, and how much spending IT has spent over the last 2 decades in their system, when you ask them for information, the expectation is that they give you exactly what you are asking for. But the reality is that this is very seldom the case. Most of the time, they have no idea what you're talking about. So on top of this is a security component. When IT gives you the data, you just made yourself an enemy. Because IT's job is to keep the data inside of data center, and your job is to take the data and analyze it. So the moment they give it to you, you start being an enemy. You have data on a laptop. Is it secured? Do you have encryption? Where are you going to take this laptop? All those questions sometimes that can be annoying to answer. But there are important questions. IT has a lot to deal with. And the security component, the fact that you're retrieving data out of the data center, exposes your organization sometimes to risk. And we have, if you look on Google and you type data breach or CD found or USB found, you'll find tons of stories of a tired employee left a CD on a bus station and all of a sudden medical records were exposed. And same goes with larger corporations, such, for example, Ernst Young, that was blamed and sued by a company because a USB flash drive went missing. It sounds very silly that such mistake happened, but humans are not perfect. Mistake happens, right? So when you use ID analytics in a collaborative, secured approach, this is where you can get truly into a very efficient zone of working. And to do that, you need to be aware of the origin of the data. When you work with SAP or Oracle data, you're working with data from a data center that runs on one or several servers. So if you are coming with your laptop to go and look at fraud sitting in the SAP system with tens of thousands of tables and several servers, you are being David against Goliath. Before you even start, your system, you're trying, I don't know how to explain, you're trying to harpoon a shark in the ocean with a toothpick. You have not the right tool to go for the battle, especially if you're dealing with large ERPs. So the collaborative approach requires you to look at building an audit data warehouse. And I've talked with a few of you during the breaks out about this. It becomes critical, especially if you have disparate data sources, to build an aggregate view of the data you have to audit. And this is actually one step that brings you closer to be able to do a monitor implementation. You might not consider to do it right away, but you are considering today accessing your data easier and not relying on others all the time. And just by going over that hump and having a centralized data acquisition process, you will be doing your work as an auditor easier, you'll be running analytics easier, and you'll be one step closer if one day in the future you want to implement monitor, it will be ready. It will be ready to act already. So by having a collaborative approach to data acquisition, you eliminate the duplicate efforts, and you enhance visibility as to what is happening, and you keep the data safe. So an audit data warehouse usually requires to be in the data center alongside the other databases and the source data systems. And you need to do that securely. Centralizing your projects is fine, but if you centralize them on the network storage, where everyone can open and access the folder, or where it becomes hard to know who has access to which folder, it's not safe. And this is where you have exposure to theft. And this is where IT gets worried. So how does IDEA Server resolve that and resolved it in all those case studies I presented earlier? Well, we have built-in features that are designed for secured collaboration. And this is what we did with version 9. We thought about this very carefully, and we enhanced and modified the platform to address those concerns around more performance, more productivity and automation, but in a secured environment. So when you look at, for example, the projects, you can see directly who has accessed. You can see when the project were accessed the last time. And those are IDEA Server projects that appear. When you connect it to IDEA Server, you can see the link between the IDEA Server project and the local project. When you connect to IDEA, using IDEA Server is as easy as using IDEA. It's the same user interface, everything the same. The only difference, you have green and yellow databases. That's it. And IDEA is the only cat in the market that allows you to do multitasking, multi-threading simultaneously on the desktop and the server. Which means if you're working on the server and running large tasks on large databases, you can still work locally on other databases, or you can work on other databases on the server as well. It is fully multi-threaded. The libraries that we've introduced, and that answers the question earlier, within the library, you have the corporate library, which is made to have a centralized view on some specific data sets. So if everyone is using one script all the time, instead of having duplicated scripts across projects or sending them by email, you can store the script in the corporate library, and it's read-only. So if a team leader arrives and plays that this is the script of reference, no one can modify it, but everyone can use it in the different projects. The local library is for yourself. If you have reports or custom data that you reuse, you can put that in your local library. And the current project library is the project you worked it on. You still have project overview, but project overview is taken to another level. When you are on IDEA Server, think about it. When you are locally, you have access to all the history that you have performed, right? When you connect to the IDEA Server, you see all the history performed by the other users, and you can filter by them. So what does that tell you? If you are a junior auditor and you start a company and they have IDEA Server, you don't need to ask anyone what they've done. You don't need to spend time walking around what happened. You can filter and browse and discover who has done what in that project before even asking questions. Right? So Jerome showed you that earlier. You can select an audit process. So people call it scripts, visual scripts. I call that actually a process, an analytical process, because that's what it is. You're having a start point and an end point. And you can take a branch of that process and do whatever you want with it, right? You can update it, modify it, share it, store it, and convert it to Visual Script, as we showed you earlier. And in an IDEA server environment, this makes a lot of difference, because when you do something, you'll never have to do it a second time. That's the promise. Eliminate repetitive tasks. And collaborate. So we were talking earlier about what if I leave my office and I come back in the office, can I synchronize with IDEA server? Yes, you can. If you have if you modified your script while you're away, it will tell you your version has been modified. It's not the latest version. It's not synchronized with the server. And all you have to do is right-click synchronize, and it will synchronize the data between the server and your local workstation. So that way it ensures that everyone has the same version at all time. The impact it has on the audit team is that it gets rid of at least 40 to 50% of the workload without even talking about the performance gain in terms of speed of processing. Because what you do when you build an audit data warehouse, you automate and you identify the process of data acquisition. The auditors, when they arrive in the morning, they don't need to ask IT for the data anymore. You would have had a schedule, and you see here you can schedule a script and automate it, and you can tell the script run every night, run every first Monday of the month, run every last Friday of the month, run every week, every month, every 2 months, every Tuesday. And when you do that, you know exactly when you first time set up the data acquisition process and build the audit data warehouse in a project in IDEA server, the goal is that you don't need to do imports anymore. IDEA server will do it overnight for you. You arrive in the morning, the data is already there. It might even have started a few simple tasks. So you no longer have to do imports. You don't have to do preparation of data anymore. You don't have to do send email and file sharing, because everyone that is authorized has access directly to the materials and your notes and your Word documents and your videos, if you put videos, directly within the project libraries. So we eliminated, essentially with version 9, and with the new features of IDEA server, 35 plus 10 plus 5, we eliminated about 50% in average of the workload during the day in the life of an auditor on IDEA. And this is without even speaking about the performance gain of running analytics on server hardware or the virtual databases. So all we did is streamlining the audit process, the audit analytics process by 50%. The data will be available in IDEA server directly in IDEA. You can analyze and share easily all the related materials. All you have to do is need to discuss the results when you analyze them. So the side benefits, which for me actually are when I found it exciting, the side benefits of using a server platform are very significant. The tasks run faster. On any given standard server hardware, you'll go 20 to 50 times faster than on a laptop when running a summarization, for example. And it's nothing to do with us. It's just a server is a Ferrari compared to a laptop is a Toyota Corolla. It's just not the same type of chassis, not the same type of power, not the same type of machine. The data security is no longer your problem. We used to work with auditors that had their hard drive encrypted, and they were very concerned of not losing their laptop, right? Because the responsibility, very sensitive information might be contained in audit data files. With IDEA server, it's not your responsibility anymore. The data resides on the server in the hands of IT. And the other side benefit is that disaster recovery, and also you're retaining the expertise of everyone who has worked on the platform at any time. We don't wish any colleague to leave, but if they do, not everything is lost. And we are very happy to welcome new colleagues, but training them sometimes is annoying, to explain them all what happened. Then you don't need to say, just go to that project, look at that branch, and we'll talk after, right? This is really a value add also in terms of training. So how do you get there? How do you get there is involving IT. If you help IT, they will make you very successful. IT, the best way to explain it is that they are paranoid about security, they're very busy, and never have enough resources. So that puts you more or less in the mood of how to deal with IT. They're obsessed with security and compliance and need to control their system. They do not like people that like to take things out of the security zone. They don't like people messing with their databases. And any potential breach of security starts a nuclear war. If you have a security analyst and you start telling him, I want to access directly your record and do some analytics on it, I hope you have, you're calm and you can take the fire, because you basically made him not very stressed and he might not sleep well at night. So the best way, actually, I can explain what IT is and what an auditor is in the eyes of IT is this way. It doesn't come from me, it comes from someone that has been in the industry for a long time. Picture a castle. The castle is the data center. The data inside is the jewel, it's the princess inside of the castle. Okay? And you as auditor are the guy that show up in front of the guardian, which is the IT guy, and you say, hey, I'm going to go in the castle, take the princess out for a walk in the forest, but don't worry, I'm going to bring her back. Not the best thing to do when you have a big guy with a sword in front of you, right? But this is exactly what happens when you go and talk to IT and tell them, I need access to the data, right? It's their jewel, it's their princess. They're here, their whole job is to protect it. So IT, it's all about a game of giving and getting in return. You need to reassure them and give them the means to be as control freak as they want to be. I hope there's no one of IT here. But I was an IT manager, and I admit it, I sinned, I was a control freak. That's part of the job. The IT needs secure data. They need control of access. They need to justify a return on investment for their capital spending on the new hardware that they're going to give you. And they need a disaster recovery plan. And in front of that, us from Audit, we need more data access, data integrity, speed, and on-demand analytics. And actually, when you put that in front of each other, it kind of fits, doesn't it? It actually makes sense. With more secure data, you get more data access. With IT controlling access to data, you have data integrity. So actually, IT and Audit have a joint common interest. They just don't know about it. So how do you resolve this is by explaining IT that they will be able to do their network backup on the data by themselves and fully control and secure the data sets. The IT-compatible imports process of IDS Server will allow them to schedule data transfer from their system using their own system scheduler, not our scheduler necessarily, and put that data in a location that IDS script will retrieve and centralize it on IDS Server. So you're telling them you don't need to do much modification to what you do. You keep your existing system in place. We just piggyback on them, right? Not much more work for them. And the IT-generated imports are very simple. When you do automate in IDS Server, with the way the architecture of IDS Server has been done is that we leverage the scheduling and automation of Windows Server. And we didn't do that because it was less work. Actually, it was more work. It would have been easier for us to use our own scheduler. But we did it this way because when you use the standard Windows platform components and the scheduler of Windows Server, IT has a Windows Server Operations Center, and they can monitor all their servers from one centralized view with their own application. So when you do that, you're basically telling them the application will play nicely along with you. So for you, it's just a right click in IDEA, but behind that, there's a lot of things that happen that are made to suit the IT infrastructure the best possible. The second point is speed on the projects and the data. Traditionally, IT is very busy maintaining servers. That's what they spend most of their time, making sure the data center runs well, everything is in order. And the traditional computing platforms are all centralized in one server or two. And when you used to talk, I need to have a new website, or I need to put up a new web server, they will have to provision a new server for it. And usually that means new hardware. IDS Server is a distributed computing platform. During the crisis in 2008, when there was zero budget, zero, that's what they were telling us. So we need to implement IDS Server. What kind of a budget do we have to implement the hardware? And the answer from some IT manager was zero. It was 2008 in the middle of the financial crisis. For us, it was fine. I said, okay, so what do you have? We only have a retired old server. Wonderful, that's what we need. They thought we were crazy. We were talking to them about having performance and more capacity for audit, and we were asking for old server. How come? Because it's a distributed platform, we can take 3 small lower-end servers and make it behave as if it's one big one, brand new. Why? Because CPU and RAM is not what gives the power in the server world for IDS Server. And the hard drive technology has not evolved that much in the last 4 years. SSDs exist for more than 4 years. So the distributed platform that IDS Server is allows a self-manage with a load balancing happening between the servers. It's cost efficient and it's stable. IT doesn't have to manage it. The IMD databases are not a relational database. It's not SQL Server, it's not SAP, it's not Oracle. It doesn't need a database administrator. It's self-contained and self-managed. And it's designed this way, especially for that, for a low total cost of ownership for IT. The last point that will make them happy is the collaboration factor. When they hear people sharing and exchanging sensitive data, they get very edgy and concerned. But when you explain them that you can have a buffer and limit and put a locker between all the data sitting in the data center and not have them sitting on the desktop anymore, it makes them very happy. In fact, in some situation, we explained this to the IT department, and the auditors were not happy. They said, no, I want to keep my data set. Too late. IT was so excited, they took away the data sets, and they purchased IDS Server themselves because they wanted to have control on it. So it is secured. And you will still be able to do that with the software you know, with IDEA. There is absolutely no change of functionality between all the tasks of IDEA and the tasks of IDS Server. So even if IT secures everything in the data center, you'll be able to do the same amount of work. And that allows to build a modern auditing team that is ready for monitoring. When you have IDS Server implemented, you're able to address from ad hoc to repeatable to centralized analytics. And that will allow you to do the same job you do faster, easier, and be prepared for the future with continuous monitoring if it's applicable for your industry. So the recommended strategy here, remove the friction points in the audit process. If there's something that always takes a lot of time and is very tedious, go for it. Perfect proof of concept. Perfect validation of the technology. Look for the best practice. There's always 1 or 2 person that likes to get very perfectionist in the analytic process. Look how they did the work faster and scale that. Share the best practice. And in general, share the knowledge. Don't hesitate. Don't be shy. When you do your audit and you do data analytics for audit, I will repeat that many times. You have an edge. You know how to cut through data. The data centers now are like a big forest with lions, snakes, and a lot of things on the way that make it be very costly for the IT and for the business to find the information. Because we in audit are so used to do that all the time, we actually have an expertise not everyone has. And don't hesitate to share it with them. When you hear IT say, oh, I need to build a new BI platform and reports and need to find this information, reconcile, the magic keyword, reconcile data sources from 2 different systems, jump on it. And say, can I have a look at it? Say, oh, no, you don't know SQL. I say, no, I'll use my own tool. I'll use my audit tool. And they always don't understand that IDEA, which they call an audit tool, they think is some kind of financial magician guru thing. They don't understand that it's just data analytics, right? So we had a situation where audit helped IT, and IT was happy and gave IDS Server in return to the audit department as a gift, right? So then you know, the relationship was much better. They were happy ever forever together and had many little data children. But this is really, when you're working well together, there's a lot of things that can happen when you mix domain expertise from auditors with the IT technical expertise. So don't hesitate to start with a little pilot project and show them what you can do. Thank you. Do you have any questions on what I just discussed?
Solon, I have one question. And this is something which comes from a number of users who have been using the client version, the desktop version of IDEA. If we put an IDEA client version on a high-end machine, will it give the same performance as an IDEA server license on a high-end machine?
Of course not. If you're only one user,
right,
maybe you'll get more performance.
Right.
But the whole point of a server data center platform is not just for one user. It's for the whole team.
Right.
And it's for the whole data acquisition process. And it's for automate overnight and do reconciliation and create an audit data warehouse. Right. So it's not the same application. If you only have one user, buying IDEA server for only one user, it has happened. We had actually in Angola, it was, I don't remember, it was a telecommunication company. Movinil, I don't remember exactly. Movicel, thank you. Movicel bought IDEA server for one user. The reason being is that a laptop or a high-end desktop was never able to hold the 12 or 10 terabyte of data they had. So then only server class hardware can accommodate for 12 or 10 terabyte of data, so that for one user, they bought IDEA server, right? So it's not the same tool, it's not for the same purpose.
Okay. Any questions, please?
So just to go on this, another important thing is you can't compare the two. When desktop, and again, it's David and Goliath. And most people don't realize when you say, I'm going to audit or do segregation of duty on SAP. We had, for example, with the Ministry of Finance, that we're giving 3 desktops for the auditors to do segregation of duty on SAP. And they didn't understand why the auditors were complaining that it's slow. And then we asked them, how many servers do you have that are running SAP? And it's dozens. So how can you compare giving 3 desktops to auditors to do segregation of duty and be surprised that they complain when they go after data size of SAP with 80 to 90,000 tables and with millions of records to do a segregation of duty. It took days and days and days, and at the end it didn't work. The desktop couldn't handle the workload. So again, it's just about giving you the tools to be a modern team. And if you go after ERP systems, the chances are the ERP system always run on a data center on server hardware. So if you have to, fight fire with fire, that's the approach here. Is it? You go after server-based system, give yourself a server-based audit analytics platform to do so.